And as we continue our coverage of Juneteenth today, we want to take a look back at the story behind the 155-year-old holiday. This year, the annual celebration of freedom comes as the country faces calls to action from activists around the world over long-standing systemic racism. CBS News special correspondent James Brown spoke to one family about what they want others to know about Juneteenth.
Everyone say Juneteenth.
Juneteenth.
For the last 3 years, Shantea and Michael McIntyre have celebrated Juneteenth with their 4 kids in their mostly white California neighborhood. What is it about Juneteenth that you want people to know?
It's not just a black holiday. It really is a celebration of freedom, and that's what America is about. And so if you celebrate the 4th of July, you absolutely should celebrate Juneteenth as well.
And everyone just dropped all their tools.
The McIntyres invite their neighbors not only to celebrate, but to use it as a teaching moment.
We reached out to the parents, let them know what we wanted to celebrate. All of the parents were okay with that, and they sent the kids down here. A couple of the parents came as well.
I got text messages from the parents and said, thanks for teaching my kid about that cool holiday, and they can't stop talking about Juneteenth.
Juneteenth stands for June 19th, the day in 1865 when Union General Gordon Granger finally arrived in Galveston, Texas, to announce the emancipation of slaves. Texas had kept approximately 250,000 black people enslaved for 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation became law in 1863. And the man who signed it, President Abraham Lincoln, had been assassinated 2 months before Granger arrived.
Can you imagine? So what Juneteenth is, June 19th, is the acknowledgement and, yes, commemoration that there were slaves that lasted 2 more years, and for them, it was a lifetime.
Texas Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee has been pushing to make Juneteenth a national holiday for 2 decades.
The potential of having this national holiday opens a whole world of discussion for America, a whole reckoning with her racism and the systemic racism that permeates the nation.
Where do you sense legislatively we are? Are we poised to see this come across the finish line?
I do. We are just very pleased at the number of co-sponsors and members who are interested in being supportive. In the resolution that we already introduced, we have 204 co-sponsors. It's delayed freedom, but it is the only recognition of the original sin of this nation. So Juneteenth is an ability to tell the story of slavery.
African Americans haven't waited for national recognition to celebrate Juneteenth. Since 1866, parades and barbecues have been a staple of black communities from Houston and San Antonio to Chicago and Little Rock.
They have some really big Juneteenth celebrations, and I would love to go out to one of those because, I mean, there's thousands of people out there.
Back in California, the McIntyres feel their small celebration is one way to bridge the racial divide during this tense moment in our history.
My husband and I, we took our children to a peaceful protest, and I found myself walking with a fist in the air. And there was a movement that when I looked around, it wasn't just black people holding their hands up. And so that's why I feel like there is some momentum around Juneteenth.
And James Brown joins us now to talk more about his reporting. JB, we heard at the end of your piece about how one family gets the sense that the holiday is gaining momentum across the country. How long has this day actually been celebrated and, more importantly, recognized?
Vlad, first of all, good to talk with you and Anne-Marie, and I love the conversation that the two of you were having on the previous piece that Omar was doing as well, with rich substance there. But the holiday has been celebrated, that is, since 1866. As you heard in the piece, it wasn't recognized until 1865 when General Granger came through to bring the message, some 2.5 years delayed. But it's been ongoing and growing since that time, Vlad.
I think this year, JB, Juneteenth is certainly getting a lot more recognition than it has in previous years. And a lot of that has to do with the ongoing protests that we've been seeing across the country, not only about police brutality, but racial injustices. So I'm curious, how are people using this day, reflecting on this day, to certainly celebrate the freedoms, but also acknowledge that there are changes that still need to occur?
A sad catalyst for all of this introspection, if you will, Anne-Marie. I'm just glad that it's taking place. Again, I referenced the very substantive conversation that you and Vlad were having. Look, and not a very good analogy, and I'll admit, but this is not a very pretty situation either in terms of the intent and purpose of excluding this significant occurrence in American history and not included in the textbooks at all. And when you look at the McIntyre family, a wonderful American family in celebrating and educating their predominantly white neighbors for the purpose of the kids to grow up with an understanding of what history it is, because it is a shared history. But Anne-Marie, I think about whenever there's sadly an airline crash, the FAA comes in, the NTSB, and they will take a look, go through the wreckage and the carnage, and my words are being advisedly used here, to see exactly what the problem was that caused this for the purpose of correction and making advancements. Does not that principle, that makes sense in terms of this as well too, so that we truly can move forward? I heard Vlad indicate that oftentimes the finger of accusation is pointing at the victims, and that's so unfair. But I think any sobering examination of this and moving forward, hard conversations for all of us to have, is the only way that we can embrace the lessons and to move forward.
And JB, as you know, several major companies are also beginning to recognize Juneteenth. What can you tell us about those efforts and how they're being received?
It's been a slow-moving process, if you will, if you consider the 100-plus years of it, but it makes sense, and it goes back to that sad catalyst of George Floyd, God bless him, and so many others since African Americans were brought here to the shores that you and Anne-Marie alluded to. Yes, so you're seeing corporate America getting engaged with significant sums of money, but more than money, there needs to be an involvement. I think Anne-Marie mentioned before about the diversity that we're seeing in young people across the globe who are registering the frustration at seeing man's inhumanity to man. To me, that's the only way that there's going to be any meaningful progress. It has to be diverse, it has to be unified, it has to be comprehensive, and it has to be sustained so that we can, as mature adults, come to grips with the situation and to move forward. And you're seeing on the, I like to call it the 7 mountains of influence, of which the media is one, certainly business is another, arts and entertainment, etc. Across all silos in society, we ought to all be embracing this to get rid of what is the most vexing issue that we as a country have been facing forever, it seems.
So true, so well put. James, thank you so much.
Thanks, JB.
Good talking with you and Vlad, as always.